So you want to get your first reserve study, or your first in a long time. That's fantastic. But how do you get the rest of your board to agree? Let's start with a good understanding of why getting a reserve study is a smart idea. This will help you overcome some common obstacles or objections and share the benefits of having the information you need to guide your association safely and successfully into the future. Follow along and see why other associations are getting their first reserve study and why it's not all about what the law says in your state. Well, thank you, Paige, and to our audience, hello, and thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us for a program on breaking barriers, getting your first reserve study for your association. Well, whether it's your first one or your first one in a long time, Joe and I are here to help you be prepared and not surprised about the issues and your decision points. I understand that a large number of people attending today are here having a relatively fresh reserve study within the last 3 years. But I know you have other associations that you know of that you're aching to give some good information to guide them forward, to share what you know, and we're going to be able to provide you with some great talking points throughout this session here today. Now, a reserve study helps you make wise decisions to prepare your association for the future. And so in this session today, we're going to set you and your association up for success for you who don't yet have a reserve study. And this is the outline that we're going to use today. Before we dive into step-by-step what happens, Joe and I are going to set the table by addressing why this whole issue of getting a reserve study is important. Most associations have a balanced budget, and most associations are reasonably well insured. But most associations don't have a credible reserve study prepared within the last 3 years. So most associations are stumbling forward into the future. And that's a problem that needs to be solved. And it starts with this program today. What you see on screen is a national map of reserve study legislation, complements of the Community Associations Institute. It's the national trade organization. Look for where your state is, and you'll see that blue states have specific reserve study or reserve funding legislation. Green states have some reserve guidance, but nothing real specific. 10 states have no legislative guidance or requirements. And as you heard introduced just a moment ago, Joe Wise of Wise Property Solutions is with us here today. I know Joe through some committees we've served on together at CAI. As you can see, you can remember your 5th grade geography. Tennessee is one of the blue states that just passed some legislation requiring reserve studies. So I want to welcome Joe to the program today. And from an experienced manager's point of view, tell us about the new Tennessee legislation. So Joe, welcome to the program.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, Tennessee passed legislation last year. Governor signed it 1 year ago last month, and it went into effect at the first of this year. And what it did is it called out in Tennessee a requirement to have a reserve study for those communities organized under the 2008 Condominium Act. So if you're doing math, you would recognize that that is a relatively recent act. And so it means that the law only applies to associations that have been chartered and organized since 2008. So it does not apply to all associations, and it particularly doesn't apply to older associations, but it is sort of a dipping of the toe into the water. And it is beginning the conversation here in Tennessee about the value and the importance of reserve studies for associations generally.
So it sounds like it's kind of starting with the easier situations, the newer properties, and not wrestling with the beast of old properties, perhaps with a lot more deferred maintenance.
That is correct. It I hope will serve as a model, though, as some of these newer associations follow the law, which has a 5-year requirement and some of that. What people will begin to see is if you do the right things, you get the right results. And so I've been told by those who are in the General Assembly that there are at least some who want to see the issue revisited, and perhaps it will be more comprehensive in its application. But right now, it's a fairly narrow slice of the pie.
Got it. Well, I'm also thinking that as the newer associations get reserve studies, follow the reserve studies, and stay looking nicer, it will also almost force the older associations to kind of get with it to keep their properties better maintained and not lose ground economically. Is that fair?
I think it is. We certainly don't have to look far to see associations that have 30 or 40 years of history of deferred maintenance. And you absolutely see the consequences of that in the values and sales prices in those communities, because buyers may not be able to tell you exactly what's wrong, but they can see deferred maintenance and they take a discount when they make their offer.
Yeah, it's just like any single family home that when you see a fixer-upper, it looks like a fixer-upper. And you're not going to pay top dollar for it.
That is true.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's explore this whole idea of why more and more and more associations, in fact, all associations should be getting a reserve study to guide themselves forward. And I wanted to share a few ideas of some of the reasons why we get clients coming into association reserves. And for the very first time, and one of them is associations that have just faced a traumatic special assessment. It was a bad experience, and they realized we don't want to do that again. Let's plan ahead to avoid that kind of problem. And Joe, as a manager, do you see that a lot?
That the special assessment is when you find yourself coming to terms with the choices you've made. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a deterrent.
And so what it does is it's like the worst option, and it's often the last option. And so what has generally happened is an association has just experienced that trauma, and it is now hoping to right the ship and change course.
There was a little thing that you said there that I want to bring out. We're talking about board members facing either a special assessment, which is a bad idea, and a raising the homeowner assessments, which they're also going to say is a bad idea. And they're left between two choices, but I'm going to say one of those choices is a whole lot better than the other. Okay. Well, let's go down the list here. Another one is it might be a new board or along the same lines, a board that just wants to make an informed decision. They're tired of feeling their way forward, tired of stumbling their way forward. How do you see that in your role and from your point of view, Joe?
I think it helps boards because they're not having to guess their way through it. But when you think about what a reserve study looks like, it lists all those elements that are of shared responsibility. It puts a present dollar value on what addressing their future replacement would cost, and then it inflation adjusts that. What it also does for a board is gives them an authoritative third-party source to show their owners when they're having these conversations about what it's going to cost to be prepared for all the things the association needs to be prepared for. That isn't just, Charlie's wild guess over here. We've had somebody come in and they've looked at what we have, they've assessed its likely useful life, and then they put a value on it. And so now instead of that's too little, it's too much, and that kind of fruitless argument that's free of any meaningful information, you now have a document that you can look at and you can say, do you think the paving estimate of square feet isn't accurate? Do you think the cost isn't reflective of what the cost would be? It just gives you a shared sense of truth.
Got it. Well, let's go another step further. Recommended by a manager. You're in a position to be guiding associations month by month by month forward. And I would imagine it makes a manager's job a whole lot easier if they have, well, like you say, if they're equipped or the association is equipped with that decision-making document that serves as kind of a map forward.
Absolutely. It is fundamental to our ability to manage a community is a recent and reliable reserve study. In the same way an insurance company is going to underwrite a prospective insured, a management company goes through a similar process. And so that process is this association looking to hire a manager they've got a reserve study, they've got a plan, and they need somebody to help facilitate? Or is this association looking to hire a complaint department that is going to be left in a reactive position that really oftentimes is going to be largely counterproductive and unfruitful?
And then there's even more going on. We see this in different areas around the country. Some areas, the attorneys are more sensitive to it. And as they are giving guidance with respect to interpreting the governing documents and board's responsibilities, how they can take good care of the property, how they can minimize their liability, we see attorneys recommending reserve studies. Is that significant in your region of the country, or not as much?
Not as much with the attorneys, but certainly with the next one, the insurance agents is very much a part of the conversation. I was speaking to a prospective client here about 2 weeks ago, and it's a 40-plus-year-old condominium community. They have a history of deferred maintenance. They'd never heard of a reserve study when they were talking to me, though they've been with a management company. Their insurance costs had quadrupled over 2 years, and their deductible had multiplied by a factor of 5. So the premiums went up 4-fold, the deductible went up 5-fold, and it was in large part because they had significant deferred maintenance that the insurance company, and particularly the underwriters, were trying to hedge against. And the market in the insurance business is not good. And so how an association looks in terms of its capital assets is very much a factor in that whole process.
Yeah, you got me just kind of looking up at the ceiling here thinking they are paying more money now for less coverage. And that's crazy. But then again, if I was an insurance company and I looked at that property and I saw how deteriorated things were, I would begin to think, I kind of don't want to insure this place. There's a lot that could go wrong.
Yes.
And it is so much in an association's best interest to take good care of the place, not just because of property values, but because of all the related costs. And right now, insurance is a really big cost.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then from my point of view, the biggest reason of all, the biggest thing that associations can't change or deal with is Mother Nature and Father Time. Those are unstoppable, indomitable forces, and they are tearing down associations on a daily basis. And the way board members put up a good defense against this is to have a plan and not get too far behind and not let that deterioration get a toehold at the association. Joe, as you were talking, I was thinking about the pictures on this next slide, a property that they've been casual about. There's a lot of deterioration going on here at this association, and this is a property that is just ignoring the reality of what Mother Nature and Father Time can do.
And in the spirit of full disclosure, not a place that I've ever visited.
Good. I wanted to move on from that slide so no one will have the chance of recognizing it. But
right.
all those pictures were from one property. And now I'm going to go back to the first slide of this section here in the program where we talked about legislation. And I want to remind everyone that you don't need a law to tell you to pay the bill of ongoing deterioration. Owning real estate is expensive, but fortunately, it's very predictable. And that predictability of how long a roof is going to last, how long the asphalt is going to last, means that these things shouldn't be a surprise. So just as you pay the insurance bill and the utility bill and the management bill and all those other kind of things, I want to encourage everyone here that this bill for deterioration is real, it's ongoing, and it's just part of life at the association.
Yeah, I will often tell boards when we're having this conversation, this is not a question about if you pay. This is a question about how and when you pay. And the sooner you begin to come to terms with the overall cost exposure, the greater the array of options that exist for you, and the less painful those choices become. It's sort of the difference between a 22-year-old planning for retirement and a 62-year-old planning for retirement. The further you get down the pike, the closer you get to those eventual costs, the kinds of choices you can make that can prepare you become more substantial, and the array of options presented to you are fewer.
I want to say to Paige, our producer here today and our MC, We should have Joe on the program more often. That was wonderfully articulated. At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.